The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is blessed with an abundance of nature's beauty. But we are in danger of losing some of the most beautiful and significant parts. In fact, we have already lost some of them. Although none of the plants you are seeing are extinct, they no longer exist in Pennsylvania. I wish that I could tell you that there are only a few of these plants which have vanished, but unfortunately, that's just not true. There are more than 115 species of plants which have disappeared completely from our area, like Marcia ringo, Bearberry manzanita, Carolina petunia, Cooper's milkvetch, naked bishop's cap, crested yellow orchid, and small white lady's slipper. And worse yet, there are many others, like this swamp pink, which are well on their way down the same path. The statistics are dismal. Of the 3,340 kinds of higher plants in Pennsylvania, well over 500 are already gone or are in jeopardy. This means that more than 15% of all the species in the state are in peril. Many species are being added to the list every year. But there is hope. All these species are listed as endangered. There is still time to save some of them. But why are all of these plants in trouble? What is leading them down the road to extinction? And isn't extinction a natural process that happens all the time? While it's true that more than 95% of all species that have ever existed are already gone, the rate of extinction has accelerated greatly in recent decades due to the actions of humans. The world has lost about 200 kinds of animals in the last 500 years, but we have lost at least twice that many plants each year, and are currently losing them at the astonishing rate of about 2 per day. There are some places in the world where matters are at their worst. In Hawaii, 97% of all native species are threatened. In the tropics, an area the size of Pennsylvania is being cut and burned every year. The problem is especially critical in the tropical areas like Central America, because they hold about 40% of all the species on Earth. Worldwide, about 20% of plant species are in trouble. Of the approximately 25,000 species of higher plants in the United States, about 3,000 are imperiled. There are many reasons for this. Some species may be so highly specialized in their habitat requirements that they are not able to tolerate even the slightest change in their environment. Kate's mountain clover, shown here, is found only in shale barrens. This habitat has a soil made of loose, unstable pieces of rock, an area often too hot and dry for most other plant species to tolerate. The clover can't compete against other species in fertile soil, and can only make a living in soil so poor that other plants can't survive in it. A variety of problems face other species. Some plants are as tasty as ice cream to grazing animals like cattle or deer. These orchids were neatly nipped off by a hungry deer just as they were about to bloom. Some species are being crowded out by immigrants. Purple loosestrife, a native of Europe, has spread over about 1/2 of the United States in the past 35 years. Although a beautiful plant itself, it has squeezed out many native species which are valuable food for wildlife, turning many of our wetlands into botanical ghettos. Reedgrass, also known as Phragmites, is a highly competitive invader. Not needing to produce seeds to spread, its rhizomes quickly reach across wet areas, sprouting wherever they touch. Historically, 40 species of rare wetlands plants existed near Philadelphia's Tinicum National Wildlife Refuge. Partly due to these invaders, only 4 of those can be found there today. Home gardeners may unknowingly contribute to the problem. Digging up wild species from the woods for home flower beds often doesn't work. Many transplants don't survive the move because they go into shock due to root damage or not being able to adapt to a drastic change in habitat. Propagated store-bought plants are often better adapted to living in gardens. But be sure that the plants you buy from the nursery or bulb catalog are grown from seed or propagated by cuttings from cultivated stock, and not dug from the wild by wholesale diggers. A trillium labeled hardy northern stock usually really means collected from nature. Field-grown usually means that the plants were dug from the wild, then transplanted to a field for a year to recover from the trauma before being sold. Native orchids are also examples of species which are usually collected. Horticulturalists have not yet mastered the secrets of growing them commercially. Propagated plants almost always cost more than collected plants. Large volumes and low prices for bloodroot, jack in the pulpit, or bluebells are tip-offs that they probably were dug. Intriguing plants sometimes show up in catalogs or in shops. These Venus flytraps were purchased at a grocery store. Without living sphagnum moss and demineralized water, they don't last long, and usually end up like these. Although the tricks of propagating these carnivorous plants are known, they are threatened by over-collecting in their home states of North and South Carolina. Prickly pear is Pennsylvania's only native cactus and is listed as rare. 1/3 of all cacti in the United States are now endangered. Some may take 100 years to grow a few feet tall and sell for $10 per foot plus $50 per arm. One, for sale in a nursery, had a $15,000 price tag. In Europe, cacti fetch 10 times the amount they would bring here. But the most serious threat to our plants and animals is the destruction of their habitat. When a forest is cut or a wetland drained, animals might be able to move to another area. But the plants just die. In the Pocono Mountains, land developers are clearing the forest and filling in wetlands at a record pace. Proper permitting and zoning have not always been adhered to in the rush to develop the land. The small whorled pogonia is Pennsylvania's only federally endangered species, presently known from only 15 sites in the country. In our state, it's found in Center County, where it is threatened by logging operations. These holes mark the spot from which 2 of the remaining specimens were dug up by vandals or unscrupulous collectors in another state. Wetland species face the most threats. Many people feel that all swamps are mosquito-infested and full of snakes. Once drained, their rich soil often makes ideal farmland. The first spreading globe flower ever discovered was found in Pennsylvania in 1791, but now is one of our most endangered plants. It can only live in alkaline wetlands called fens, which make very productive farmland. The number of fens throughout the state is shrinking rapidly, and so are their very special plants. Our single most significant natural area is Presque Isle in the northwest corner of the Commonwealth. It boasts over 300 occurrences of plants and animals of special concern, marked on this map by a colored dot. What makes Presque Isle so special is that it's our only sandy beach habitat. Many organisms otherwise found only along the North Atlantic coast are making their last stand in Pennsylvania along the shores of Lake Erie. The dunes are home to American beach grass, beach pea vine, silverweed, and other plants that can survive on the wind-blown, shifting beach face. Why should we care? What does it matter if all these plants and their habitats disappear? One of the most often asked questions is, what good are these plants? Consider all the things that plants do for us. They provide us with oxygen, medicines, chemicals, food, and the greenery that beautifies our gardens and countryside. Let's take a look at each of these points. As photosynthesizers, plants have many roles. In the process of making their own food, they produce the oxygen which we breathe. A wholesale loss of plants would disrupt the balance of gases in our atmosphere. Plants are also wonderful chemical factories. 50 years ago, penicillin was only something which molded bread. Since then, it has saved countless lives. Originally, most of our medicines were derived from plants. Today, they're still the source of about 40% of our drugs, worth about $8 billion a year. The juices from aloe, a common houseplant, promote the rapid healing of burns and skin irritations. Aspirin was discovered when natives were observed chewing the bark of a willow tree to cure headaches. The original birth control pill came from Dioscorea, a relative of a wild yam. Common periwinkle is the source of vincamine, a drug used to treat cardiovascular disorders. Vincristine, derived from an African periwinkle, is the drug of choice against leukemia. On a more local basis, the common woodland wildflower mayapple is the source of 3 anti-cancer drugs. Bloodroot used to be the source of some of the war paint of Native Americans, but it is now used to produce sanguarine, which prevents the formation of dental plaque. It interferes with the bacteria which damage the gums. A potential male contraceptive, gossypol, is produced from the cotton plant. Clearly, there are many medicinal substances which plants produce. However, less than 5% of the world's plants have been screened for their healing capabilities. It will be unfortunate to lose species even before their usefulness can be discovered. Plants have other commercial uses. Many gardeners use companion planting when they plant a border of marigolds around their more edible crops. One of the safer pesticides used in our gardens, pyrethrin, makes use of the natural ability of certain chrysanthemum species to ward off insects. Amazingly, the Copaiferous plant of the tropics produces a sap which is very similar to some petroleum-based fuels. With little refining, it can be used directly in diesel engines. Over 1/2 the food produced and eaten by humans comes from just 3 plants: wheat, rice, and corn, and most of the rest comes from fewer than 20 others. Yet there are 75,000 species known to be edible. Continual improvements to crops depend on crossbreeding with their wild relatives. There must be wild species with the desired characteristics, such as high yields, disease resistance, and palatability. For example, in 1973, 15% of the U.S. corn crop was killed by southern corn leaf blight. Crossbreeding with Mexican maize produced a strain resistant to this disease. Plants serve other roles in the ecosystem. A single plant species may have relationships with as many as 30 other species. In the food chain, all plants are food for something else. Many species of insects, like butterflies and moths, use only a single plant species for food. If that plant disappears, so might the other organisms which depend on it. Some of our favorite plants of house and garden face problems too. African violets are a $30 million per year trade item. The wild species is listed as one of the 12 most endangered plants on Earth. It is threatened by loss of its habitat. There are more than 200 species of gladiolus, but we have used only 6 so far in breeding this colorful garden favorite. The others should be preserved as stock for producing future hybrids. There are plenty of reasons for preserving plants: economical, medical, commercial, aesthetic, and agricultural. However, there is another, perhaps more fundamental reason. What will we pass on to future generations? Do the plants have their own right to live? From an ethical and moral perspective, do we have the right to destroy one of God's creations? Biologist Edward O. Wilson suggests, the one process ongoing in the 1980s that will take millions of years to correct is the loss of genetic and species diversity by the destruction of natural habitats. This is the folly our descendants are least likely to forgive us. What is being done to save these plants? Isn't that what the Endangered Species Act was supposed to do? Surprisingly, the answer to this last question is no. When first passed in 1973, it offered no protection to plants. It was not until 1977 that plants were included. The process of getting a plant listed is very slow. Although biologists had suggested more than 3,000 species, 5 years after the inclusion of the first plant, only 64 had been listed. As of 1988, only 139 species of plants are included, and only 31 more are proposed for listing. Plants are still treated differently under federal law. Animals are considered to be the property of all citizens. That is why hunting regulations apply to all persons, even on your own land. Plants, however, are the private property of the landowners, unless they try to sell them. Therefore, laws only apply to lands in which the federal government has an interest. To put it bluntly, this means that if you have the last specimen on Earth of a plant on your land, you may do with it as you wish. Even kill it. Plants are not soft, warm, and cuddly. They don't generate the emotions and sympathy the way some animals do. Most endangered species monies are earmarked for those species that do. And not all endangered plants are pretty. Some are very plain, while others are downright ugly. However, one person's weed may be another's wildflower. At the state level, things aren't much better. 50% of the states have no plant protection laws. Pennsylvania is making significant progress towards protecting its plants. 1988 saw the listing of 521 species of special concern in a variety of categories. Small white lady slipper is no longer found in our state, so it is classed as one of Pennsylvania's 119 extirpated species. Our 135 endangered species, including Tennessee pondweed, are in imminent danger of being lost, occurring in only perhaps 1 to 5 places in the state. Umbrella flatsedge is one of 36 threatened species. This means that it's in jeopardy of becoming endangered if immediate action is not taken, and is only known from about 6 to 20 sites. 83 rare species, like snow trillium, are found in from 20 to 30 locations. Not enough is known about 146 species like American columbo, so they are ranked as tentatively undetermined. They may qualify for listing, but more searching and field work needs to be done. American columbo may be later changed to a higher rank or dropped from the list entirely, depending on how many plants are found. Golden seal is one of 2 vulnerable species. Although not rare yet, it is collected in substantial amounts for its medical astringent properties. Therefore, it must be given special consideration to prevent over-harvesting. Worth more than $150 per pound for dried root, it is no wonder why ginseng gathering is common in Pennsylvania's woodlands. Because collecting of ginseng root means killing the plant, protective regulations are currently in force. Collectors must have a license, and plants may only be collected between August 1st and November 30th. Only mature plants with red berries may be taken, and the berries must be planted in the near vicinity. Penalties for violating these rules include a $100 fine per plant. Some beautiful plants may not be as rare as you think. Trailing arbutus, fringed gentian, and mountain laurel are not critically threatened and have no special protection. One of the most important aspects of our Commonwealth's program is the Pennsylvania Natural Diversity Index. Through this ongoing study, scientists seek new information regarding our rare and endangered natural resources, including plants, animals, and geological formations. The program's biologists use tips from all kinds of sources to try to track down and monitor imperiled plants. Many times, this means checking very old historical records in museums. Herbarium records sometimes contain the exact site where a plant was collected more than 100 years ago. Because plants are firmly rooted in the ground, if the habitat still remains at the original site, there is a good chance that the plant is still there too. That's a pretty big if, however. Biologists who go into the field to check these sites often find that they have changed and that the plant community has been destroyed. Sometimes, however, they get lucky and find that the plant has survived in the same spot for many decades. Careful record keeping in the field will ensure that this site will be monitored in the future and perhaps enable trained eyes to recognize similar undiscovered sites from maps, photos, or airplanes. Programs for game animals like trout, pheasant, bear, deer, and bass are paid for by license fees. This work is supported by the Wild Resource Conservation Fund, known to most people as the Wildlife Tax Checkoff. Taxpayers can donate part of their state tax refund for non-game wildlife programs. Doing something wild benefits the 80% of Pennsylvania's wildlife which are not normally pursued by hunters, fur takers, or anglers. You can help preserve Pennsylvania's plants by supporting conservation organizations in their efforts to buy or preserve biologically important property. Let your state and federal officials know that you want strong conservation legislation. Learn more about the plants and animals around your neighborhood. Even in the heart of the city, some species abound. And make sure that your children know about them too. Raise their consciousness about the natural world by instilling a conservation ethic early in their lives. Garden ethically. Even some of the most brilliant wildflowers, like butterfly weed and cardinal flower, are easily grown from readily available seeds or cuttings. Be sure the bulbs, seeds, and plants you buy come from producers who are as respectful of the environment as you are. Let companies who sell plants dug from the wild know why you refuse to buy their products. There have been some dramatic success stories. Jeweled shooting star was known from only one colony. Recent efforts have now located more than 10 additional colonies. We each must take upon ourselves the duty of helping to preserve our natural heritage. The World Wildlife Charter states, "It is the responsibility of all who are alive today to hand on to posterity the entire wealth of diverse animals and plants. This generation has no right to rob future generations of this rich heritage. Extermination of other creatures is a disgrace to humankind." There are many species of wildflowers in Pennsylvania that are not endangered, rare, or threatened. They brighten the days of anyone who opens their eyes to see them. Let's be sure that they too don't fade away.